All right, so let's talk about the Gorn Rock Survivors and the Messenger of Peace, Neil. Like we're back in preview season. Like it feels so weird to not be covering tournament stuff. Um, Inquisitor says he wishes they'd recolor, resize the dice a bit. Yeah, I understand that they're a little off as well, but dice tooling
I did see a picture of that on Facebook of how different the dice are.
Dice tooling's tricky though, so I'm wondering if they don't have the original molds anymore. You know what I mean? Like it's possible that they just don't have the original molds. And this happens in games because I don't know how much you know about molding and the process of molding, but you can only do so many like dice molds before the mold breaks, and then when the mold breaks, you have to remold it. I guess we can't really say the coloration on the dice are wrong because we never knew what time dice color was supposed to be. Obviously, all of the imagery and things like that made us believe that it was more red, but the challenge you have with injection molding is exactly what I just got done talking about. There's a lot of variance in that, and I wonder if that's why it came out a little browner than red. But yeah, so I mean, we'll see. They may release a dice pack later. Functionally, the dice don't have any impact on the game, I don't believe. And even the cards don't either, if you're sleeving, which is what all tournament players are going to do anyway. So I guess we'll just have second copies of some of these.
Well, like if you went to a Magic tournament, like as an example, and some of the cards in your sleeves were different size than other cards in your sleeves, you would get deck checked and disqualified.
Sure.
Like assuming that somebody like called you on it, the judges would look at it and like, you know, you kind of feel like which ones are bigger and which ones aren't just by like rubbing your finger along the side. And you would be disqualified, like you would get kicked out of the tournament.
Yeah. Okay, well,
so I don't know what Plaid Hat's thing is going to be, but you know, it is possible to take advantage of that if you're not above board.
Sure,
I guess.
Well, let's go ahead and pivot. Let's talk previews. We've got about an hour, which God knows we can talk about 6 cards for an hour pretty easily here. But let's jump in and let's talk about Lulu, her Conjured Alteration spell Spark, and then her loyalty card Phoenix Barrage. Let's just break these 3 cards down and talk about them. What we know about them up to this point. For any of the viewers that are maybe not up to date on the previews, I'll just go ahead and break down these cards really quick, read them out to you. They are on screen right now for you all to see. I might be able to zoom in here. I used to know how to do this stuff, and now I don't spend much time doing it.
If your little like settings dots on the top right, you can change.
Yeah, there used to be a shortcut key for it, but I don't remember what it is now. I tried what I thought the shortcut was, and it didn't work. So, all right, so we've got first up is Lulu Firestorm. Firestone, the Phoenixborn of Gorn Rock.
First stone.
You're right. It's not Firestone. First stone.
No.
My reading skills are top of the board tonight, guys. Battlefield of 6, good sized battlefield. Spellboard of 4, also nice, and 16 health. So we got another Phoenixborn that can take 4 spellboard. Neil, this opens up potential 4 book statuses, but she has an ability called Bolster, which is a side action and exhaust, and 1 basic, and place 1 status token on target unit you control, and attach a Spark Conjured Alteration spell to that unit. I like this ability. I think Bolster is pretty neat. Let's read the Spark really quick.
I think all of the text on Lulu is very good.
Yep. So this the Spark Conjured Alteration spell has got a conjuration count of 3, so you can have a maximum of 3 of these on your battlefield. Spark itself is a main action. Discard this spell to deal 1 damage to target unit, and it provides a +1 attack to the unit while it's attached to a unit. First off, there's a lot to unpack there, right?
Well, kind of. I mean, this is just like Aerodel 2.0, right? And I think she's worse than Aerodel, mostly because Aerodel has 8 battlefield. But having 4 spellboard and 6 battlefield is quite good. There aren't a lot of Phoenixborns that have that. It's like Rin and Aerodel are like the only ones. Is that right? That have a 6+ battlefield and a 4 spellboard.
Cole also has 6/4.
I thought he was 5.
I'm pretty sure he's 6/4. I'll make sure that way I'm not later on YouTube somebody's not yelling at me saying I got that all wrong. um, Cole is a 6'4", 15.
Okay. So those having a large battlefield and space for 4 books is strong. Like, we watched Philly win every Swiss game this season and play to the semifinals. Uh, Playing 4 book Airedale. So just her starting battlefield and spellboard, I think, is really good. She's low on the life side, but not like, we using Philly again. We saw a 16 life Airedale play 5 rounds of not losing in spite of having 16 life.
She matches Airedale and Noah. Noah's got a little larger battlefield with that 4.
The reason that I'm using Airedale as an example, obviously, is because the life matches and the spellboard matches. And her ability is very close to Water Blast. It essentially, like, and until you just read it, I had totally ignored that it placed a status token on. So that's kind of neat. That allows you to actually play the card Flash Strike.
Right.
But in general, like, giving +1 attack to a unit and also being able to do a damage is, essentially 2 damage. It's a lot harder to, like, get it where it's going. Water Blast is
very targeted.
Just targeted 2 damage. But in general, like, paying a single basic and a side action and your Phoenix Point Exhaustion to add 2 damage to your, like, damage output for the round, it comes out pretty close to Water Blast, I think. Well, and in some cases, being able to split the damage up in the way that Spark does is better than Water Blast. Again, it's more awkward, but sometimes you can, like, you like spark your Frostback Bear and attack their Frostback Bear, and then you get to, like, sack your Spark to kill their, whatever. That's doing better than Water Blast could do.
So chat's kind of lighting up on this conversation, so I just want to add some comments from the chat here really quick before we get too deep. Basically what Inquisitor is saying is that leveraging the status token for bolsters will be that critical point. We definitely hit that point here on the conversation. He believes that Airedale wins on stats, but Jaguar is a weaker loyalty card than Barrage. We'll get to that in just a minute. Brian is responding, I agree, Lulu is unique, being very strong, but Water Blast is pretty cool. And then Inquisitor continues this conversation with Bolster kind of gets you a Water Blast, assuming the Bolster unit can live. Bolster can hit face for 1, whereas Water Blast can't hit a PB. That's assuming that comment is directed specifically at the unit attacking Phoenixborn and not getting blocked.
Right. And all those things are true. And, Carl says it's also possible to get the second +1 attack out if the unit survives, which is a good point to make. Then you get 3 damage out of the thing instead of 2.
Right. So I think there's we talk about these kinds of things a lot when we talk about floors and ceilings, right? And Water Blast is the floor and the ceiling of Water Blast are identical, right? They're 2 damage to a unit. There's no bottom on it. There's no top on it. There's just
it's as good as your opponent makes it,
right?
And it's always pretty good. It's very rare that Water Blast doesn't have a high floor, but you're right that, like, we know what Water Blast does. It always does what it does, and that's it.
Yep.
Warrior makes another good point about what Carl saying. If it survives, if you have 2 sparks in play, all of a sudden, your ability to deal damage in that round is, like, you bank up the damage to where you can do a lot of crazy stuff.
What I like most about Spark is that, sometimes when we look at cards in a vacuum or in design, like think Strengthen, for example, ready spell that gives your units +2 attack. That card is best suited pumping little guys. We see it take its most effect when you use it on Salamander Monk, for example, to make a Salamander Monk a 3/1, right? Because nobody wants to block that 3/1, so it's almost like deal 2 damage to Phoenixborn for no dice spend after the initial dice spend. So as the game progresses, Strengthen just gets stronger and stronger. But the Spark, in particular, I don't think it cares one way or the other. It can go on big units, like it will be just happy.
Yeah, I mean, the most common thing you're going to see is like my bear kills your bear, right? Like
Right.
that's
3/3, right? Absolutely. Well, in fact,
and same with all knights, essentially, right? Like
right.
my 3/4 kills your 3/4.
And I think that where you might see one knight in particular get a little love with Lulu is the Battle Seer with the Quick Strike.
Well, the best one, of course, is Master Vampire.
Well, sure, Master Vampire.
Then you just hunt down the other knights.
Sure, absolutely. But the Quick Strike's also reasonably good for avoiding counter damage, right? So, if you can force that early Phoenixborn block, then Battle Seer becomes very powerful at hunting knights as well and not taking any damage in return. And that opens up the spark play, right? Whereas, like, if you still take the 3 on your Master Vampire, there's a chance that you're not going to get to use that spark ability.
We've just seen a lot of units, recently where they're like X+1, and this breaks that parity to where they don't bounce off each other anymore. So it's good. And it also deals the damage. Like if Lulu said, side action, 1 basic, place a status token and deal a damage, like not to the same thing, obviously, but like if that was what she did, all she did, it'd still be pretty good.
Right.
So
yeah, and obviously we talked about like how time we've talked about this in the past if you've been a follower of our show a long time, but we've talked about how time is sort of, it's got this status token motif in it, but it hasn't really taken that and leveraged it to its fullest value yet, right? We see it in Flash Strike, we see it in Standard Bearer, other time cards. So the fact that Lulu is the natural time,
it's sort of the biggest thing, right? Like,
right. So
the rabbits have not come to their own yet, really, and they're so heavy on needing that status token to be effective. Maybe it's the way to do it. It kind of is like not good with rabbit because it is also a side action,
right?
So you can't like status token and then make rabbits.
Yeah, it does open up accelerate if that's where you want to go, but I think there's better things to do with accelerate than this play. But I mean, it is possible that accelerated decks are fine.
Like we talked about a couple times the last few weeks, like Phoenixborns that have a good side action, you essentially always want to do make accelerate better,
right?
And I think this falls into that category, even if it's not as crazy as some of the other ones we've talked about.
So Inquisitor, you don't like rabbits in a 6 battlefield. Is that implying you only want rabbits in bigger battlefields than this, like 7 and 8s only?
You only want it in Aerodel and Kochi.
Yeah, I mean that would be my question here as well. Jericho's 7 as well, so I mean you could also play it in Jericho, but
yeah, I guess there's a couple 7s.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a fine. Yeah, you got James. You also got Noah at a 7 battlefield, so rabbits can play in Noah as well. But I don't disagree with that. You definitely have to have a lot of self-clear with rabbits in general because they are a real liability when they can't block for you. But I don't want to get on the rabbit conversation in this particular chat right now. We're just talking about cards like from the time set, since this is a time natural, and everything we've been showing up to this is all basic costs. So, like when we're looking at it from that perspective, I think that what I like about Spark, I probably wouldn't use it as much for self-clear, but I definitely like it as like it's a main action second source of 1 damage. So it's like having a Frostbite on board for no dice. I mean, you've spent the dice, obviously, but if you've gotten value out of the unit, and because it's an inexhaustible ability, if your opponent isn't clearing these units off or spending dice into these units, then you have the ability to just make a Gilder or make a Frostbite ping onto a unit for no dice and a main action, which we know that taking additional main actions can be very powerful if you can out main action your opponent round over round, and Spark kind of gives you that sort of tempo, which is why I'm not sure it's best in a weenie deck, but it might be good in a weenie deck still. Just like making your Salamander Monk a 2/1 is probably just as good as, you know.
That will depend a lot on like what the rest of the meta looks like, right? Because 2/1 Salamander Monk is not that much better than 1/1 Salamander Monk.
Right. And it's not as good as 3/1 Salamander Monk from Strengthen, right? Like it's not as good as that.
Yeah, 3 is the magic number, at least right now.
Right.
But yeah, I think in general, like it being not colored, just a basic, makes this ability very, very good. And in general, I think she is very, very good.
Yep. Yeah, I think she looks good. She looks good on paper. The eye test looks to be there, in my opinion. So it's really just going to come down to what do the other... Well, we know one of the cards, right? So there's 9 more cards in her deck to be revealed. What do the other 9 cards in her deck look like? And once we know those answers, then we'll have a much better image on what they're doing. The fact that she's natural, I think we'll see very... To me, it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of this because one of the things that I think a lot about here is... Natural is already one of the strongest dice types, so hopefully we don't see a ton of natural cards that continue to elevate natural's status in the meta, if you will.
I can say pretty with a lot of certainty that natural is not going to get worse.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that it would be. I think it would be. I think that nature's not going to get better, but like maybe not better by so much that it's crazy. But I mean, we all know Prospect Bear is insane,
right?
And Prospect Bear is like literally the perfect unit to put a spark on, because it trades up to all the things, and then it's beefy enough that it might survive to where you get to use a spark as a gun,
right? That'll be my Inquisitor says natural is supposed to be built on strong summons. I agree. I would like to see another solid beatdown unit. I also agree with that. Although I think another solid beatdown unit is a little scary alongside Hammer Knight and Frostback Bear in a suite right now in general. Because I honestly think if you're not, if you're playing natural and you're not considering those cards, you're probably not thinking correctly about natural as a whole from an allies and conjuration perspective. But yeah, I think something between, Inquisitor says something between a monk and a bear, I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think it would be a mistake to print another summon book on the level of monk or bear in nature. We would just never see another color plate again.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility for sure, especially on a book, but maybe on an ally, we might be all right. I think Cam asked, would Lioness be good with Spark? Yes, sure. I think Lioness is great with Spark. Yeah. I think that's a perfect use of Spark, and a side action is to take Lioness to town and take 2 tasks as a 3/2 with Spark.
I don't think the unit actually matters. Like I was saying that the difference between a 2/1 salamander and a 1/1 salamander isn't big, but like you would still do it and you'd be happy about it. Like,
right. I think that. You would also...
Most of the time, I think, Cam, that your stock unit probably dies as a 3/2 back, but...
Yeah. I think you would like this with... you'd like this kind of thing with...
I think the better discussion is what unit wouldn't it be good on? And then when we can't find one, we know that it's always good. That's we're just talking this unit would be good, and this unit would be good, and this unit would be good. Of course it would. I guess it's bad on, What's a unit that can't attack?
I think it's good on Owl, Warrior. Why isn't it good on Owl? It makes
Owl's probably the thing it's worst on.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
It's bad on Owl. Okay. I mean, it might be. I mean, a 1/2 is not terrible though. I mean, it's not terrible. 1/2 that has an inexhaustible main to deal 1 damage.
How many units can't attack? Is it just Turtle and the 3/2?
That are rooted? That's a good question.
Because those are what it's worst on, probably. But it's actually good on Turtle because then it kills the Prospect Bear back.
What do we got on rooted? We have Devotion puts rooted on something. Root armor doesn't count. Turtle Guard and Biter. Turtle Guard and Biter are the only rooted units.
Because somebody in the chat earlier said Steadfast Guardian is Steadfast rooted, but it's actually good on Steadfast.
Steadfast Guardian is not rooted.
Okay, well, it's good on that too.
Yeah, I think it's very good on Steadfast Guardian because you make a 2/3 with alert.
Yeah, it's good on Ice Golems because it pumps the Ice Golem.
Pumps the life on Ice Golem and the attack. Yeah, I pass on that. But yeah, Devotion, Biter, and
so I think that we can check off it's literally good on any unit, It's just like better on the units that are good. So I don't think you need to, when you're making deck building decisions, think very hard about playing or not playing units because of Spark. You should just play units that are good, and it will make them better.
Yep. So I think we've beaten this horse, right? Like we've really hammered this on. Like Spark is very good. It's Brian mentioned comparing Lulu to Cole in identical stats, except for Lulu has more health. So I think that's
one extra health.
One extra health, yeah. So yes, we did talk about Flashlight synergy, Carl. Flash Strike is definitely a huge synergistic component of Lulu, and it's the kind of thing.
This is the first thing I've seen that really makes me want to play Flash Strike, because it's like, this is what it needed. It needed an ability that made a status token that did something you already wanted to do anyway.
Right.
So that it's not dead otherwise. And that's where we're at with Lulu. I think it's very good. And, things that have synergy with status tokens that we presume will be printed in these two decks will also have synergy with this ability.
Right. So let's move on to Phoenix Barrage, her loyalty card.
Yeah, so Nick just bamboozled me with this because, we were talking about this when the art came out. And he was like, that's the new Phoenix Barrage. And I was like, I don't think they're going to print a new card with the same name. But they did. They just did. Mm-hmm. Nick was listening to me talk, and he's like, I'm going to make Mia look like an idiot. And so they printed same name, same cost, different text, very similar, with a different picture. So they went all out on ruining me because I thought if they were going to reprint Phoenix Barrage, it was going to have the old picture, because why wouldn't you reuse the old artwork to save money?
Right.
But I think the artwork on it is cool. She's kicking Orrick in the face.
Yep. I do like this artwork a lot. This is an action spell that's a main and 3 basics to play. It's deal 2 damage to a target unit, then deal 2 damage. And there's no then. Deal 2 damage to target unit, deal 2 damage to target unit, deal 2 damage to a target Phoenix form. So what this does, and to everybody's point before, let's just get the elephant out of the room so we can actually talk about this card legitimately. Golden Veil just blows this card up, right? Blows it up all over the place. Like, it pukes on it and says, haha. Like, there's not a better or more favorable one card, and dice exchange than Phoenix Barrage and Golden Veil. Just isn't. But barring Golden Veil, moving forward, because not everybody plays Golden Veil, to be fair, deal 2 damage to target unit, deal 2 damage to target unit, deal 2 damage to target Phoenix form. This has a lot of value when combined with other supports. And what I mean by that,
I think it's just good in general.
Yeah.
Like, it is not 100% better than the old Phoenix Barrage. It's like 99% better than the old Phoenix Barrage, but armored units take less damage from it than the old one if you were trying to like shoot them at the same thing.
What I like about this in comparison to like a Shadowhound, obviously, and we're talking about a focused Shadowhound to be able to do some sort of similar effect, or Flash Archer, is it's more dice efficient across the board. It pings past armored. So if you are on Fester plans and things of that style, this can still enable your target to get festered later in a round. And that's
I don't think
deal.
This is the best loyalty card. I don't think it's the worst loyalty card. Mm-hmm. The thing it suffers from most is that it costs 3.
Right. But 3 basics is reasonable, right? Because you don't have to heavy meditate into this. It counters nicely against mill decks that can punish other 3 dice.
I think it's reasonable for a non-loyalty card that would do this. But like, you compare it to things that are close to it, right? Like, so like, I think Earthquake is a pretty good comparison to what Phoenix Barrage does, where it kind of has modes of like be a sweeper or kill a 4 toughness guy,
mm-hmm.
and Earthquake is better at both of those things and cheaper.
Yeah, but I don't think the 2 damage of Phoenix form could be looked past either. Like when we look at a meta that's full of Molten Golds, right, and burn, and let's make no mistake, Lulu seems to want to try to burn the world down a little bit here.
I don't even think I agree with that. Like, I mean, her artwork looks that way, but her other abilities are like unit combat and unit damage,
Sure.
you know? And Phoenix Barrage is a good removal spell. If you ever get two things with it, it's better than Earthquake, unless Earthquake gets two things, right? Like,
I think it just gives you closure, right? This gives you closure where you can.
Do you think it would be a better card if it was two basics and didn't deal Phoenixborn damage?
That's a good question.
I think it would be 100%, like, not close.
I'm not sure I completely agree with that. I like having a little reach. That's why I like.
It does have
so
reach,
much.
though. This is a card advantage spell, like,
Sure.
And I agree that 2 damage to Phoenixborn is not nothing, but in general, like, I don't think that. Like, I think you need to look at it as a removal spell because that's what you're going to play it as, like, almost every single time. And so when we compare it to the other removal spells that exist in the loyalty card area, I mean, Earthquake is an easy one to compare it to because it does 4 damage to a unit, and then it does some other stuff. Right, it's 33% cheaper. You look at like Sword of Virtue. I think Sword of Virtue is a much better card than this.
Maybe.
And then so I guess another good comparison that takes into account the Phoenixborn damage is the Astria one.
Mark of the Goddess.
Yeah, because that has that reach you're talking about. It goes to face, but it also is like a damage removal spell.
Sure.
And this one's awkward, but it's also 2 dice cheaper.
I think
the difference between 2 and 3 dice is just like a very large leap. Like if you look at the allies that cost 2 dice and the allies that cost 3 dice, it's like infinity better at 3 dice than it is at 2 dice.
Yeah, I mean,
and this doesn't feel that way to me. Like it's like a huge jump of.
So I'm going to add some chat here. Brian says 1 marginal die for 2 extra damage to PB seems worth it, considering almost all the 2 damage to PB require 1 power die and reactions to set up. I agree that this is one of the only sources of 2 damage to Phoenixborn proactive, right? That doesn't require power sides on dice. There is value there. But I do agree with Neil's assessment that 2 dice to 3 dice is a pretty big leap. Whether or not, like, this is the kind of card to me that ends up.
And I agree with Brian as well that 2 damage to a Phoenixborn for 1 dice, like, that's a great rate. Mm-hmm. It should, you would think, like, if I was going to design a card that just said do 2 damage to a Phoenixborn, it probably costs 2 dice.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what we're talking about here. Just that text. The card as a whole costs 3. And when you're looking at spending a 30-year turn, all of a sudden it feels a lot worse to me to do what it's doing than like if you could split it up, like, yes, 2 damage to a single unit for 1 basic is really good. 2 damage to a single unit for 1 basic is really good, and 2 damage to a Phoenixborn for 1 basic is really good. But because of the way the game works, that's not like how you can exactly look at it.
And Brian, I'm agreeing with you, Neil, and I just want to add, because Brian says if I get something like Kill Owl and Gilder plus 2 damage to PB face, that seems about right. I don't disagree with that statement at all. And Kill Owl and Kill Gilder are probably 2 of the top tier targets, because those are 2 mid-range targets you can kill for 3 dice, right? And you're spending your opponent spent 1 dice into each one of those conjurations to play them, and you're going to get to kill them for essentially 1 die, and deal 2 damage for 1 die. It feels correctly balanced.
To be clear, I'm not saying this card's bad. I just think that it doesn't, like, it's like in the 80th percentile of loyalty cards or whatever. And if you're playing Lulu, like, this is an easy 3 of include.
Yeah.
I was just surprised that they kept it at 3, because they just don't print expensive spells, and the ones that they have don't see a lot of play.
Is there a more expensive spell now? on the action side?
Well, there's like Shatter Pulse costs 3. That's a reaction, I guess.
Right. So I don't think you can count Shatter Pulse. So you've got
there's like you can kind of count the James loyalty card. It's
Vengeance,
like X basics.
So the only other 3-cost actions that exist in the game right now are Summon Archer Source Mount and Summon Shining Hydra, which are really just making units.
Essentially units.
Right. So there really isn't a 3-cost action.
And this card would be like at this text you could never print it at 2. It would be too good.
Right.
But in general, the
Carl is saying
3 days and the PB damage makes Lulu stand out.
Yeah. So I just want to repeat
Lulu
that for chat.
As a package is very, very good, and we'll jump to like the top tier very quickly because the thing that I always say is like you want the loyalty card and the Phoenixborn text to both be something you want to be doing. And just because I don't think Phoenix Barrage is like the best loyalty card, doesn't mean I don't think that she's very good. Because I think she's actually better than Xander, in spite of me saying that Earthquake is better than Phoenix Barrage, just because I think the package as a whole is better than the Xander package as a whole.
So if we were gonna tier out loyalty cards, I think your top tier has to be Earthquake, Sword of Virtue, and Chaos Gravity, right? Like, I mean, is there any disputing that at this point?
Yeah, those are all in the like very good range. I
don't think they're. Cam shouted out for Copycat earlier, by the way, on Phoenix Barrage. If somebody copycats your Phoenix Barrage, like, way to go. I will reach across the table. Somebody copycats my Phoenix Barrage, I will reach across the table from you and I'll shake your hand and say,
I hope that happens because then I will subsequently beat them for playing Vicky. That's fine if they get to make that plan. Like, they kill 2 of my sparked units or whatever and get me for 5 cards or something with their Copycat, and then I still win because their Phoenixborn is worse than blank.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think that Phoenix Barrage is going to fall into that bracket just below those 3. It's below Chaos Gravity, Earthquake, and Sword of Virtue. Snake has to show in that. Yeah. So from a loyalty card perspective, Cam, I guess my issue with Snake is I don't think Snake really shines without Gilder. I almost feel like Gilder is a Mayoni loyalty card.
The Mayoni package is kind of different than other Phoenixborns because when you look at the ones we've been talking about, which is, Odette, Echo.
Well, Gravity Training is not loyalty, Carl, just to be clear. But I agree with you on Fear as well.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that. Carl, I think those are all very good. So when you're talking about Odette, Echo, Xander, those packages of the Phoenixborn plus the loyalty card are very versatile. And I think Lulu will fall in this as well because of her basic costs and the general just goodness of her stuff. You can put like any other 27 cards in there and make a reasonable deck. Mayoni sits in this weird place where, yes, her package is powerful, and Command Strike specifically is very good, but it's like a build around me, right? Like, I know a lot of people have tried like Snakeless Mayoni, and then you just kind of like meh because she has a 4 battlefield. So the package itself requires you to play like a very specific 27 to go with it. There's obviously some room for changes in there, but your deck's always going to kind of function the same way. And I just don't think that's true of these other ones, and I think that's part of what puts them a step above.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. I think Silver Snake is easily the best conjuration in the game, but
I don't think it's a good prospect fair, but
I think it's right up
if
there.
You're just like it depends on how you look at it, because if you look at the card as a whole with the costs associated with playing it and the work you have to put in, it's worse than Frostback Bear. If you just look at the text on the conjuration itself, it's worse than like Hydra or Archosaurus. And so it's in this weird place where, again, it's just this build around me. It's as good as you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a high ceiling but a very low floor.
Sure. I still think just 2 dice to make a unit that has that big of a ceiling is worth it. and why I still rank it very high as one of the best conjurations in the game. I'm not disputing Frostback Bear is easily one of the best as well. I wouldn't put Hydra in that same class. You know.
Well, that's why I was saying it's all about perspective, right? So
Sure.
If you're looking at the book and the unit, and like having to play Maoni and these other things to make the snake grow, it's a hell of a lot more work than making a 2/3 every turn on Frostback Bear.
Right.
And I think Frostback Bear is better because it's more efficient in that way. Now, if you're just looking at how powerful the conjuration itself is, the 0/4 that grows to whatever infinity 4, like that's probably more powerful than just generic 2/3. But if that's the scope we're going to look at them through, then Hydra or Archosaurus are better, because if you just take the conjuration text, they're obviously bigger and crazier.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about that perspective, and that's why I think Frostback Bear is the best. And it's kind of the same argument I was trying to make about the Phoenix Barrage, how like it would be better at 2 because things that are cheaper and more efficient tend to be better in competitive games.
Right. It just has to do with average dice spend, right? What you have to spend dice on round over round, and
but Snake takes into account more than that, because Snake takes into account deck building plus like the turns have to play out in a certain way, or else you just have a 0/4.
Mm-hmm.
There's involved even than just the dice in this discussion.
Sure. All right, so
in general, like Lulu, good. That is.
Yeah, I think we're all giving Lulu a big thumbs up, and I think she will have a big impact in Season 4. I think when Season 4 starts to play, there will be players that play Lulu, and whether or not they're...
I mean, you're going to see a lot of like turns where your Phoenix Barrage kills a 2-life thing and puts 2 damage on a bear that then is later killed by a spark, right? Like, that's just going to happen.
Right. Absolutely. And that sort of control, like, I'm a big fan of control decks, and Lulu, to me, looking at this, is a control list. But it's got some built-in reach. Like, Phoenix Barrage gives you some of that built-in reach. And that's what a lot of times I've included Molten Golds in my list, on my control list, was just to give me that reach for when the boards get clogged up to a position where I can't swing through, or can't control the board well enough to move damage through. And that's where that 2 damage can become really impactful. Whether or not it's replacing Molten Gold or going alongside Molten Gold, don't know right now, right? Like, that's only testing will really tell me whether or not that would work in a Lulu deck. But I think that for me, looking at it from a pure control perspective, Lulu's package looks like a control deck ready to go. And what I love most about control decks is, up to this point, the best control decks I have played have been Herald and Odette, and both of those have Spellboard 3. So this 4th Spellboard is a big deal. It opens up a lot of opportunity for control decks, having that 4th Spellboard. And Aerodel is kind of control-y as well with that 4th Spellboard. And so I think, you've got two very different approaches between Aerodel and Lulu, but both of them are kind of filling a similar slot, and we already know Aerodel is very good. So, thumbs up on Lulu. I think we're in a really good place with her. I don't want to spend much more time on these 3 cards because we got about 30 minutes to wrap up this conversation, and we've got some talking to do on Orrick. So let's move on. So we'll continue previews on Thursday if we get new previews by then, and we'll talk about how the new cards interact with some of these old cards some more. So just come back on Thursday if you want to hear us talk more about Lulu. So, all right. So Orrick, Gilstream, Phoenix-born of New Gobi. He is Battlefield of 5, 19 health, Spellboard of 5. His ability is called Insight. After taking a meditate action, you may place 1 exhaustion token on this card to place the first card discarded off the top of your draw pile during that action into your hand. Okay, before we say anything else about it, real quick, this has to be a card made for Impossible German, right? Does everybody agree with me? I mean, it just has to be, right? I mean, German is notorious for meditating his loyalty cards away, turn over turn, round over round, so it just has to be German's card at this point.
Well, it's just going to give him some more complaint equity, because he's going to meditate for 2, and it's going to be the second card.
Yeah, sure.
That's the like.
Fair enough. This is an interesting ability, though,
we should rate more stuff based on complaint equity.
Complaint equity. Well, we'll start a new rating system called the complaint equity system. So I like Insight. I think this is a neat ability. I think it's a little random.
Everything in this picture that has to do with Orrick is all just super sweet and probably very clunky and bad. Yeah, and it's so sad.
Yeah, so let's move on really quick to the other two parts, and then we'll just talk about the whole package because they really are kind of a whole package, right? Whereas
Right.
Lulu's Spark was sort of independent of Phoenix Barrage. Concentration and Awakened State are exactly the opposite of that, right? They're kind of an all-in build. They're to your point, they're like Mayoni. They're build around me's, right? You kind of have to build your deck around these ideas. So Concentration is a ready spell. It's your loyalty card here, and it's a side action to play, which I don't think is irrelevant. And then the cost of it is main or side, exhaust, and 2 basic. Place 1 status token on your Phoenixborn. Draw 1 card. Choose 1 die in your exhausted pool and place it into your active pool on a side of your choice. Then, if it's focus 1, then if there are 7 or more status tokens on your Phoenixborn, attach the Awakened State Conjuration Alteration spell to it. Okay, read a book there. Everybody got that? Here we go. The Awakened State Conjured Alteration spell Phoenixborn. I'm assuming this is a one-of copy. We can't see from the text, but I can't imagine you can get multiple copies of Awakened State on your Phoenix.
It wouldn't do anything if you did anyway.
Right. Side action. Remove 1 status token from your Phoenixborn. If you do, choose an opponent. Deal 1 damage to target unit they control. Deal 1 damage to their target Phoenixborn. Spellguard. The spell cannot be affected by an opponent's spell. Whew. Okay, we're through that, right? Everybody got it? All right, so let's talk about this thing. Let's talk about this concentration effect.
Yeah, the Awakened State is extremely powerful, right? Like,
sure.
I mean, it just if you actually manage to put it into play, it's bonkers. Like, you just have a turn where you're like Cole, except you don't have to discard cards, right? It's
right.
It has to do 7 at least because it has to have 7 to put it into play. So if you actually get there, it's pretty sweet, and you probably have an insane turn or 2 insane turns if the game goes that long, right? Like,
absolutely.
I mean, you're assuming you're using this thing, you're going to fire it off way faster than you can put it on. So, you're going to use you have 7 when it puts into play, maybe 8 if you have multiple copies of the concentration.
And concentration is kind of doing that resonance thing, right? Where like you spend 2 dice, but you get to return 1 dice on the side of your choice, and that's like a really interesting built-in sort of meditation. And
yeah, I mean, you're still playing with 9 or 8 dice of return to get there.
Correct. That was you completed my thought. That was what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
You're on 9 dice for the rest of that round because of it, and whether or not bringing back a single dice of a particular side value is worth playing on 9 dice round over round, with the idea that somehow you're going to have to spend. I mean, in this particular state, right? Like, you're talking about 7 rounds of play because of the exhaustion, unless you can somehow pull the exhaustion off of concentration. I mean,
you can play more than 1 copy of concentration.
Sure, but
you have to, in fact, to get to the.
Yeah,
I guess you could resonance it or whatever, but so imagine you first 5 concentration. If you're on the Awakened State plan, I assume you have to first 5 it.
Right. You probably have to open memories for the second copy.
Or you just insight for the second copy. You just meditate 1 as your side action every turn.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just so much work.
This is a lot of work.
So this is a, like, when I read this, I had to go back and read the like time power dice card.
Mm-hmm.
Because it only puts stuff on units.
Right.
It takes it off of anything, which is terrible for this.
Right. If you're up against an opponent with time, they can just use time dice against you here.
But it's like keep you at 6 or whatever. And yes, they're spending a dice, but they're also turning off your whole deck. Maybe. Like
it seems very likely. That seems like a likely outcome.
I think this whole package, like, and Orrick aside, so just talking about Concentration Awakened State, I think it's super cool, right? Like, It's a different way of playing this game than we play it now. The closest thing is like almost like Mill, where your whole plan is kind of on this weird axis, and you're doing stuff that, like, you build up to where you're gonna win. Because we're assuming that if concentration is good enough, like when you receive the Awakened State, you're gonna like get your opponent for 4 cards in play and deal 7 damage to them, and that's good enough to beat them.
So I
And
think
it probably is, but do you like you said, with 1 in play it's 7 rounds, with 2 in play it's probably 4 rounds.
well, so I was going to add to that just a little bit. I mean, going back to this build around me concept, right? Like if you have to build around it to make it work, then the best way you can build around it, honestly, is to go ahead and yeah, Cam says out of the box X for sure. I think the best way you're going to have to build around it, though, is like concentration, open memories, gates thrown open, right? And so you open memories into your second concentration copy. You play your first concentration copy. Next round, you play your second concentration copy. So you now got the focus ability. You spend your first dice to bring it back. You spend your second dice, bring one back. You then play gates thrown open, do it again. You put 4 tokens on round 1. That's going to be...
So you've spent 7 of your 10 dice doing that,
and you've got no board presence. I mean, I'm
right.
not,
you've done absolutely nothing to play the board,
right?
And,
yeah. I mean, I'm not. Look, I'm not arguing that at all. I'm saying that to me, the only thing
only 6, because Gates doesn't actually untap all of them. It only untaps 1 per spell slot, so you only get to reset 1 of them. Yeah.
Okay. So then you're right. It's only going to be 3. You'd only get 3 then. So that's remove 1 exhaustion token from 1 ready spell in each of your spellboard slots. Okay. So you're right. Like, and
because of the insight ability, it's very possible to get 3 of them in play in round 1, I suppose. But you're still like spending 5 dice to make 3 counters towards your win at 7. So in that case, without Gates, you don't even get to do it on turn 2. And I just don't know how you do it. I maybe it's good. Maybe there's some like Neil deck that just keeps you alive long enough that you get there, and then you get to go bonkers. And specifically, if they print other cards that put status on Orrick, then the cat's out of the bag, right? Like,
well, for sure. I think one more. I think we're both saying here is one more card that can apply a status token to a Phoenixborn, and you're right.
One more if the one more is something you want to do.
For sure.
If all it does is put a thing on Orrick, then it's no better than concentration, and you're just not playing to the board until you hit Awaken State, and then you have to hope that they have like exactly 7 life worth of units for you to kill.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying there, and I think the question you have to ask yourself is what are you doing in the rest of that game? And I think Orrick is really, if Orrick's going to work, I don't think it can work as a rush strategy at all.
What is his other dice?
Charm.
Besides time?
He's charm, yeah.
Okay, so he like the box puts you in possible Neil colors.
It puts you in Neil colors. It also puts you in like Beast Tamer, who's a reasonable, powerful defender to kind of set up your board defense. Some of those things are possible with Orrick. Three-Eyed Owl is very possible with Orrick as a first 5 card still doing this plan. And let's not forget, to your point, like every main action that you get to take, you can also side action meditate and pull that card to hand. So like you can just...
Well, not all of them, because... So this is a little awkward too, is concentration is a side action, and I think it'd actually be better as a main. I know you can activate it as a main like the turn you play it, but you can never like insight into it and play it.
Sure. No, I agree with that. So I mean, Cam, you're absolutely right. This is a wait and see card, right? Because what we have here is we've got 9 cards left in Orrick as well. So 9 cards left for us to look at. We need to find out what is in that toolbox of 9 cards that's going to let Orrick shine. Because it's going to have to be something in his toolbox, right? I don't think there's anything in the existing card pool at this particular time.
There is not. I looked it up. The only other thing that puts a counter on anything but a unit is Koji. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're going to play against a Koji opponent who's going to be nice enough to counter up your Orrick for you.
Can you please put one on my Orrick, please?
Yeah.
Please, I'm begging you. I'll let you have some Brilliant Thorns this turn if you go ahead and give me a counter. I mean, end of the day, this is a cool ability. Awakened State is a neat design, right? I think it's a cool design. Unfortunately, until we see the rest of the deck, we just don't know whether or not Awakened State is a real threat to the competitive meta. I think it's very possible that Awakened State like a challenge, like when you go and you like have achievements in video games.
You're gonna see a million Awakened State decks when these decks come out.
Right.
Like this is the kind of thing people love to do,
right.
and myself included. Like it's like a puzzle you try to solve and put yourself in a winning position. It's just a combo deck, right? And people like that stuff.
Right.
Those things are not competitive things.
Cam says team game. Maybe someday Cam will get to it at Giant. And Carl says Orrick is pretty decent without hitting Awakened State. Carl, I agree
do
with
want
that.
to take some time and talk about Orrick himself outside of the Awakened State.
Yep.
To preface this, like, it's like we just talked about with Lulu. I think Phoenixborns in general that don't have a great ability, like that both the loyalty card is playable to good and the ability is playable to good. I don't think they're good enough. I guess like the contrary to that is Aerodel. Just because her stats are so huge. But looking at Orrick, Insight is a very sweet ability and potentially a very powerful ability. It only draws you one card around, or one card a turn, but it draws you the card you want. And so when I read this card the first time, I thought two things. I thought, this is what Jericho should have been. And this is what Vicky should have been. And because when you break down the Insight, like, it feels like Vicky ability to me, except it's actually good. Because it doesn't cost a dice, it draws you a card, and it fixes as many dice of yours as you want.
But you can only draw one card per round, right? Because you have to place the exhaustion token on Orrick.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. But it doesn't cost a dice. That's the first thing that makes it way better than Vicky. And it does draw you a card, and it does fix a ton of dice. Like, so I like this was like, I'm like, man, this would be a way better way to do Vicky's ability. But and then I thought about Jericho, who again like tries to draw you a specific card, and Orrick just does it better. It doesn't cost you a dice. Like, I know it's not like literally you like look through your deck and pick one, but it's not that far off of that. Because, you know, we've seen decks, not top tier decks, but competitive-ish decks that like meditate heavily in the first round for an Essence Druid or something, right? And this is just like a better version of that.
Well, the only thing you have to be careful with compared to those decks which do all that meditation essentially in one shot, right? Like we saw like Matt's Fallen, Koji Fallen deck where he just like meditated to Fallen Book through 20 cards in the deck, right? Yeah, Carl, I was going to get to that point. 1 second here. This requires main actions to do that, right? So you have to set up enough main actions to be able to take enough side actions to dig through the deck. And I think you're going to have a hard time building, 15 side actions if you need to go 15 cards deep to find a specific card. So I don't think it's quite that good. But I do think, to Carl's point, Carl says, I feel a strong mill deck. 5 spell board is great for setting up the control-ready spells. Don't need dice fixing to make sure you don't mill your Dove or Abundance Books. Absolutely, Carl. I think that in this particular case, Orrick may emerge as one of the strongest mill-type Phoenixborns, regardless of the Awakened State, and whether or not it's even in the package. Right? It may not even be in the package. But
the Awakened State essentially has like no synergy with mill at all.
Well, mill still has to deal damage, right? And mill does that. Like doves are how you deal damage, right? Casting doves into empty.
What I'm saying is that mill doesn't need another win condition. The Awakened State is a win condition. If you can't win after putting this in play, you shouldn't be playing it.
Sure, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying. That's why I'm prefacing that for our listenership, that whether or not the mill package uses Concentration Awakened State, I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe there's a deck out there that Concentration Awakened State works in a mill package perfectly, right? And it synergizes and plugs in. I'm not a mill player, so I'm not the guy to talk to about that, just in general. But I'm sure what we'll see come into future seasons of Shuffle Buses, somebody like a Matt, somebody like a Stefanos, they'll come up with a Orrick mill deck, right? And they'll take it into a top 8 finals, whatever it may be, and maybe they'll even win the whole thing. But what kind of skill level will that player need to have to understand the matchup so perfectly to know exactly what they're inciting for, to know exactly what card they need in a given circumstance. That's really, really, really difficult, and the skill on this guy will be through the roof.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay.
Specifically because insight and I agree that like drawing the perfect card, I guess there is a decision point where you say, no, I don't want this one, right? And that's the hard decision.
Mm-hmm.
The easy decision is, yes, I want this one, right? Like when you're activating insight, this, I'm sure that this card brings up a lot of people think of Rangmia when they see this card.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's pretty different. Mostly like what's going to happen, like your common play line with Orrick is you're going to meditate, because it's very rare in Ashes that you don't meditate at least once in a turn, right? It's very rare. And with Orrick, you're going to meditate because it's actively good to do so. So we'll say your first turn is like play Frostback Bear, meditate, or other way around, whatever. And you see, whatever the first card is. If you want to draw it, I think the decision is easy. Like you shouldn't be using this ability as a specific tutor, but you want to be using this in a deck that takes advantage of cards that you have a large pool of Tron you want to assemble. So it's not like Fallen, where you want to assemble exactly Fallen book, but it's like, I have 3 copies of Turtle in my deck. I have 3 copies of Mirror Spirit in my deck. These pieces that you want to have more than one of, but you can't first 5. And there's a high enough critical mass in there that you're like, oh yeah, so I have a high chance to hit one of these things, and I'll do it, right? And like in the game of Magic, we've moved to where cards like Vampiric Tutor that just, search for a specific card and put it on top aren't even as good as cards like Ponder that just look at 3 and put 1 in your hand. And that's like what Orrick is. It's more like you don't have access to the whole pile, but you have pretty good access to a lot of the pile, and you get to draw one.
Sure.
And so I agree that there will be there's like a skill level where you're so good that you do it perfect every time on the choose not to pick it. And that is very hard because, you'll see your turtle book and you're like, I already have a turtle book in play, I can focus this. But you realize based on game state that that's not what you want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you choose not to draw it, right? So that's the difficult decision. But it's so close to drawing a card, and you get to see the card first, that I think it's actually easier than choosing just to draw a card. So it's going to have this weird thing where like most of the decisions are going to be very simple and easy, and then there's just like one every game that's super hard.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And real quick before we dive any deeper, first off, shout out to Damon1977 for the follow, dude. That's super awesome. Appreciate that. You picked in the follow.
I can't believe you would follow our channel listening to me talk about that.
But yeah, we in my mind, like I think insight in of itself is a strong ability, Neil, and I don't think we're on different pages when we talk about this.
Yeah, it's sweet, man. I am so excited to play this card. Orrick specifically, not so much the Awakened State. Just because I think it sounds fun, and it adds a step to the game that wasn't there before.
Yeah, and I'm sure
he's great in general.
So this is the kind of, like, to me, this Phoenixborn is the kind of Phoenixborn, like, if you like making your opponent feel miserable, Orrick is potentially capable of doing that just as good as Echo. Just by putting the perfect card, to your point, putting the perfect card or the best card for a given board state into your hand and into play every round over round. And that can be very, very difficult to play around, and can make an opponent's day pretty miserable. I mean, like, I can see Second Owl getting set up really easily off of Orrick. I can see, Essence Druids bringing back stuff that you didn't take. I mean, like, you take your pick here of different combos you can assemble with Orrick. None of those things are going to be aggressive, attack my opponent style decks, right? They're going to.
If this was any other game besides Ashes, this ability would be insane.
Right.
Like, draw a good card every turn for free, like, would be insane. And I think it's good in Ashes.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've seen, and I've learned the hard way, moving to the point where we're at now, where, like, even though I love Swifty and it's my favorite card, like, just drawing a card isn't always good enough.
Right.
And specifically because his loyalty card doesn't play to the board either, and is potentially very clunky, like, he might not make it. And based on what I've seen in this pile of 3 cards, which there are 9 other 3-ofs in his box that could totally change this, like, he doesn't look like he's going to make the competitive cut to me.
Yeah, I am tending to agree with you based on information we have right now, and that will be my preface, because here's what always happens, right? We talk about this all the time. We make some bold prediction like Orrick's not going to be a top tier Phoenix Force.
Yeah, like, they're not going to reprint Phoenix Force with the same name,
right? And then what ends up happening is they do exactly that thing, or some player within the community, a Matt Bowers, a Carl, those kinds of top tier players. They build these decks, they show up at a tournament with them, and they run rickshaw through the Swiss, end up top 8ing, end up top 4ing, and sometimes even getting into the finals. And then
that doesn't make a Phoenix Form good.
No, but
that just makes them good.
But that's that's my point, right? That was where the point I was trying to make here is that doesn't mean that me or you or the regular field of players that are not at that top tier level yet of player skill can take that same Phoenix Form and reproduce those results, right? You may want to try, and I tell you what, by all means, like, those players like Carl and Matt, they're paving ground for these kinds of decks, right? Like Matt's Coal deck from season 2, like, if you want to play something that's off the wall, that's going to get people outside of their comfort zone, and you want to learn how to play that well and play that deck a ton to improve your skill with just that deck, right? And understand how that deck operates inside of a meta, do it, because you'll probably get to be a similar level as Matt or Carl with that one deck, right? But they can do it with any deck, right? Like, that's what makes them so good. They can do it with any deck. So,
well, Schmendrick, like, they've seen all the cards, and if they're high on him, like, that's great. To me, this doesn't see these, like, concentration plus Orrick doesn't seem competitive.
And again, what makes
and
him...
if there's something about the cards in his pile that make it better, or something about the cards that they're adding in both decks that make the meta slower and make a win condition like the Awakened State good, then maybe I'll be wrong. But we don't have that information.
Right, because, I mean, let's be honest. Like, tonight's finals was a turn and a half, right? A round and a half, and it was over. If a meta's moving that quickly, Orrick is not going to have time.
I think this game was specifically, like, an outlier in length of time. But you're right, we saw, like, multiple 3-turn games throughout the top 8.
Yeah, I think, Schmendrick, to your point, and what we've been making through this whole conversation up to this point is we are on a wait and see with Orrick, and so the hot take right now is not good enough yet.
But I do really want to blame just because I want to activate Insight. Like, you were talking about making your opponent miserable. Like, it's very possible that the text on Insight will make your opponent miserable. Because I've played games of Magic with Sensei's Divining Top, and, like, they're just going to meditate, put a card in their discard pile, turn their dice up, and then sit and think for 10 seconds every single time. And,
so cool.
like, if you're good and fast at it, it'll be fun and cool. But if you're slow and bad at it, then it will be painful for anyone watching.
And painful for anybody playing as well. Because it's just a lot of decision points. I'm sure that Orrick is going to give Dijon over there on Ashteki a ton of headache to figure out how to make work. Because he's talked about how the draw card interaction can be really problematic in the techie interface. So I'll be curious to see how much trouble Orrick is to get implemented for him. But and you know, again, bottom line here. These are hot takes. They are by no means the gospel. We sit back and say all of this stuff as we reserve the right to change our opinion later on.
I'm always right.
You're never right. Let's just be real about it. Like, but the reality is that I'm excited for 2 new Phoenixborns to come into the game. Right. I'm excited to see new charm cards because I think the charm suite needs something that's a little more interesting than just mill. Personally, that's just my hot take. Like, I know that there are certain numbers of players that are just in love with mill, and I mean, but charm has enough mill, right? Like, we don't need a lot more in charm to make mill competitively viable, if that's what we're talking about. We've seen those mill decks do powerful things, and so.
Yeah, Charm is just like a support color, right? Like, there's a lot of decks are playing Charm dice, but they're not playing like Charm dice for things that aren't Gilder or Golden Veil.
Charm needs a
Hypnotize, I guess.
Charm needs a little bit more of a signature unit beyond Essence Druid and Beast Tamer. I think both of those are good units, but it needs a little bit more of a proactive unit.
Nobody plays Beast Tamer, and Essence Druid is played as like a speed bump that gets a spell back. It's like less of a unit.
Right. And then, you know, when we talk about time, obviously, like, we're just getting more time cards in this pile as well. So who knows what the time cards are going to do. But we've talked about how just adding more Phoenixborns in the time suite only deepens the time pool and makes time a more legitimate magic, you know, type. And we saw a time card in the finals with Turtle Guard, right? Like, Turtle Guard made its way into the finals. We knew Turtle Guard was a strong unit. There's no doubt about that at all. And we saw top 8 with Time Hoppers and Kaya's Fallen deck. So Time is already starting to make a little bit of a competitive splash at these top tables, but we're still not there yet, I think, in what I would call legitimate Time decks. These are all splashes of Time, right? They're not looking at Time as a functioning magic type, as a primary magic type at this point.
Time, like Charm, is just a support thing, but Time has a different problem than Charm, where it just doesn't have nearly as many cards that exist.
Right. So as we get more of those cards, we'll see how Time evolves. Will it evolve into more of a support magic type like Illusion and Charm, or will it get some of its own legs like Divine and Natural can, and you know, see those kind of more proactive approaches? I would say, looking at cards like Lulu, my opinion is, yeah, we might see some proactive Time stuff happening. When we look at things like Orrick, I say, oh, I don't know, maybe we're going to get some more support control type stuff. And not that those are bad. We just have a ton of that already in Time, right? Like, Stasis is a control card. Outmatch is a control card. I would argue to a certain extent Flash Strike is a control card.
I think Stasis and Flash Strike are both very aggressive.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure on Stasis yet. I have not played enough Stasis.
I don't think Stasis is very good, but I think it's better at an aggressive strategy than a control one.
Maybe. I mean, it's very possible.
Remove a blocker.
I think it has power as a card that exhausts a unit when you want an exhaust a unit so that you can hit it with a 2 shadows. And that feels very controlling to me. It's a 2 dice, 2 card removal, which is rough. That's what's rough about Stasis. Why Stasis may not. But
I've just never seen it be good. I've seen it be good as a like blocker removal. I've never seen it be good as like they attacked and you exhausted it, and then the next turn they just like untap their guy and attack you again the following.
Right.
And it doesn't do what you want it to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it really has to be a situation where you can stasis an attacking unit and then get value by removing it in some capacity, however you remove it. I just don't think
you have to attack it back.
Right.
But if you're doing that, then like you're less controlling and you're more aggressive.
Right. I don't know. So anyways, I think, here we are, 8:30. We managed to spend an hour talking about 6 cards. Told you we could do it, chat. Anybody that didn't believe us, better start believing soon.